are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for
keep yourself in the loop of everything football on the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast. The latest news on and off the field, be it college football, Big Ten, SEC, Big 12, Pac-12, ACC to the NFL. We've got you covered. Listen to the Golden State Media Concepts Football Podcast.
And welcome everybody to another edition of the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. As always, I'm your host, Kenneth, and it's great to have you guys here on this Monday, February 3rd. We have a lot to cover on the show today. Before I get into all that, just want to remind you guys, tip or donate, get your comments recognized, make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat. If you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast, makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate your guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net. That is gsmcpodcast.net. So let's get into what we're going to discuss for today. So a couple of Super Bowl related topics to open up the show. Well, the first one is really to just talk about the fact that it is officially Super Bowl week. We have made it. We will have media day this week with the players meeting with the media, and obviously there'll be some things that they talk about that, I'll have to highlight at some point. But we have made it the last week of football, a bit build up to a game, and it's sad, but we'll talk about the game all week, and we'll start off the first show of this week by doing so. We'll talk about Andy Reid as well, talking about how they're not focused on, the Chiefs are not focused on a three-peat. They are focused on just this game, so we'll get into that. And then a few other things. We'll talk about Sam Darnold, and supposedly his stock has dropped. Obviously, he was going to be a free agent, or possibly could be a free agent, depending on what the Vikings do with him. And his price may have dropped because of how he performed the last couple games of the season, so we'll get into that. We'll talk about Russell Wilson, his recent comments, his desire to stay in Pittsburgh. We'll talk about that. And then also we'll talk about Cam Newton, his take on his MVP versus having a Super Bowl ring. So let's get into the first topic, which is just talking about Super Bowl week. So that's right, we've made it. Like I said, Philadelphia Eagles against the Kansas City Chiefs, a matchup that we saw a couple years ago. Now, that's a game that I will highlight during the week, probably tomorrow, to kind of revisit that, how that game went. But that was a very entertaining Super Bowl, and I feel like this is going to be the same kind of game. Well, not exactly the same, but it is going to be an entertaining game. Now, a lot of fans are not very excited about it because it's something that we already saw, and I understand that, but I do think when you take a step back and you look at these two teams, we got the two best teams in football going at it. Now, when you look at the Chiefs, I know record-wise, yes, but did they play like that all year, offensively especially? Not necessarily, but the Chiefs, they know how to win tight games, and they did that a lot this past season. And it could come down to being another close game in the Super Bowl. And then on the other side, you got the Eagles. And, they took a little bit to get going. Their defense wasn't great to start out the year, but it really came together, and it's become one of the better defenses in the league. And Vic Fangio has done a great job with that defense, and Howie Roseman did a nice job building this defense back up after last year. Zach Bond, the linebacker, he's been talked about constantly, an underrated signing. And then obviously a couple of young corners and a couple defensive backs in the secondary with DeJean and Quinyon Mitchell. They have really done a nice job rebuilding that. And then, of course, Saquon Barkley coming out of the backfield. And, the storylines going in, I mean, obviously, actually, Saquon Barkley and Cooper DeJean, I think their birthdays are going to fall on the Super Bowl. So, we'll see what they bring. Does Cooper DeJean get a pick in this game? Saquon Barkley, I think, will perform well. Now, I don't think he's going to have a game like he's had in these playoffs because I think the Chiefs, they're going to be ready. This is going to be the best defense that the Eagles are probably going to see in the postseason. And, the Packers, they held them down a little bit. I mean, their offense, the Packers couldn't score, but Packers defense, I thought did a good job against their offense for the most part. I mean, Barkley did have that one big run at the end, and he did have over 100 yards, but like I said, I thought the Packers did well. The Rams, they got to Jalen Hurts. They got after him, but, again, they let Barkley run wild against them. The Commanders' defense just never had a chance. But I think with the Chiefs, this is the best defense that the Eagles are going to face. Now, I think the Chiefs are a little bit susceptible to the run, so that's something to keep an eye on. And the Eagles, I think, can exploit that because, we talk about the Chiefs' defense, but at the same time, you look at the Eagles' offensive line. The Chiefs' D-line is going to have their hands full with that offensive line. And Barkley is definitely going to have some big runs in this game coming up. But looking at some of the other storylines, I mean, again, it's a repeat from a couple years ago. Teams are a little bit different since then. Andy Reid is coaching against his former team. There's no Jason Kelce on the other side this time, so we can't say it's going to be the Kelce Bowl. But a lot of the talk this week, and we'll get into it in the next segment, is just the three-peat. Chiefs being the first team to ever three-peat. And that's something that is very intriguing going in. It's something that I've kind of just looked at and said, I want to see that. Just because, maybe it's the only time I get a chance to see a team three-peat. And if it's going to be any team, it's going to be this one. The Patriots never three-peated. Now, they won 3 championships two separate times, but they never three-peated. So I want to see that. And then obviously, with Patrick Mahomes, he's going for his 4th Super Bowl championship. I mean, and he's only been a starter for, going on 7 years now. It's unbelievable. And I said the same thing last year. Like, a lot of this is stuff that I said last year. That this is unbelievable. Mahomes in just a short time. I mean, look at what kind of career he's been able to put together. Because what else can you say? Every year he's just continuing to build his resume. And, I think we'll talk about, we'll revisit the Brady Mahomes debate because that's something that's continued to be had. Now, obviously, I'm not as passionate about it as other people because, you have the Brady people that are going to say, yeah, he's never going to be able to catch him because Brady beat him in the playoffs twice, but they don't provide any context to it. They just say, oh, Brady's 2-0, but they don't go into depth on why Brady's was better in those games, why Brady's teams won those games. They don't do that. I think even with this Super Bowl, if Mahomes is able to win it, still got a little bit to go before he catches Brady. But he's on the path to do it. But we'll have to wait and see. And we talk about quarterbacks. This is a big game for Jalen Hurts. And Jalen Hurts played well in the last Super Bowl. He did. Now, he did turn the ball over, which was costly. But he played well. And I think he's going to play well in this game. This is going to be an entertaining game. Even though, if you're not excited about it, I get it. But this is going to be a good Super Bowl, what we have here. And I can't wait for it. And, who's going to be the guy to step up? Maybe there's an underrated player that we don't talk about at all that makes a big play in this game. Because you go back to the other Super Bowl, and, the Chiefs, they had Kadarius Toney run back that punt return. That was a big play in the game. Nick Bolton, like I said, he got the scoop and score off of Jalen Hurts. And Mahomes was banged up in that Super Bowl. And now he's going to be healthy for this one. Who is going to be the guy to step up? And can the Eagles get after Mahomes? Now that Mahomes this time around is healthy. The Eagles have the advantage when it comes to the offensive line because the Chiefs, they kind of had to shift their offensive line a little bit because of injuries. Joe Thuney is now playing tackle, and he's usually an interior lineman. Are they going to be able to hold up against this Eagles pass rush? Brandon Graham might be playing in this game, and if he does, it's going to be on a limited snap count. But we'll see. And look at the Chiefs. They went out and they brought back some guys that know the system. Isaiah Pacheco goes down. They bring back Kareem Hunt. And Kareem Hunt, I thought, had his best game of the year against the Bills in the AFC Championship game. And Juju Smith-Schuster had a couple of big catches. And he was on that team from a couple years ago that won the Super Bowl. Kareem Hunt was on the Chiefs from 17 to 18, and, the off-the-field incident happened, and the Chiefs let him go. But then he came back after he was with Cleveland, and he was good for them this year. But like I said, I thought he had a burst to him that I thought he didn't have all year in that game against the Bills in the AFC Championship game. The Chiefs, they just go and they bring guys back. Like, they even brought McCole Hardman back, too, last year. He's not going to be playing in this game, but, they just bring guys back that know the system. And it works. So, yeah, it's exciting. It's an exciting time. Final game of the year is coming up, and obviously we'll talk about it all week. But these are just my thoughts. Some more thoughts on the game, even though some of it's kind of the same. But, how many times can you talk about the same game? So, but let me know what you guys think about this game. How excited are you for it? How amped up are you for it? If you're amped up for it at all, let me know. We are going to take our first break of the show now, and then when we come back, we'll continue our discussion with the Super Bowl. But we'll talk about Andy Reid's mindset, how he views this game going in. How does he view the three-peat? We'll talk about that when we come back. So with that being said, stick around. And we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Lord, give me a sign, a sign.
I wanna be the greatest. Everybody on the fake shit. I look around and feel like everybody is the fakest. I make this every day and I'm impatient, hoping one day I blow up from the basement. Statement, the top is so vacant. I don't hear shit that I think is amazing. Waiting for my day when I'm playing sold out shows for 1,000 faces. Hey, give me that crown, get in my way and to be put down. It ain't your place, all this my town. If I want that shit, then I'll get it right now. I'm losing it, the noose it fits, I'm losing shit, a stupid myth. You choose to live or choose to dip, you choose to fight or lose your grip and lose a gift.
I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind? Please, Lord, give me a sign, a sign. I feel like I'm losing my mind. Is everybody in the world blind?
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the second part of the show, we are going to now talk about Andy Reid and his mindset going into this game because, like I talked about earlier in the show, and obviously, whenever we've talked about this game, is just the fact that the Chiefs are on the doorsteps. They're really on the doorsteps now of history. And he made an appearance on the Rich Eisen show, and he was asked about the three-peat, the possible three-peat. And he said, I haven't heard one mention of it. I haven't mentioned it. I don't plan on mentioning it, but I'm also not naive enough to know that they've heard it. I mean, I've heard it a ton up to this point, and I'm sure I'll hear it more this next week down in New Orleans. We all know that's out there, but what matters is how you take care of business. What's going to help you is that you focus in and take care of business today while we're doing our practices or in the meetings we have today. Take care of that, and everything else, you let the chips fall where they may. So, nobody internally, it seems, is talking about it. Now, they did bring it up last year at the parade when they won, because if you remember, Mahomes brought it up that they're going to go for the three-peat now. But now that the season, now that they're in the middle of it, they're in the thick of this journey. I mean, they're towards the end of the journey now. Now they just have one last obstacle. Now it's like, all right, we got to get our minds right, focus, and be able to get over this one last thing, and then they could talk about it all they want. And, the Chiefs are going to be prepared for this game coming up. And you don't want that to be, you don't want the possible three-peat to be a distraction. Because, that can open the door up for negative things that come. And this is the biggest game of the year. And the Chiefs have been to this game a lot in recent years, so they know what's expected of them. Now, on the other side, you got a very good football team that has also been to the Super Bowl. They did lose to the hands of the Chiefs, but they've been there. So they know what's expected of this game too. So, if there's any coach that I trust in this kind of spot right now, it's Andy Reid. Just because they know how to get their minds right. And it's just they just have done a lot of winning over the last few years. And look, I think most people know where I'm leaning towards this game, but I think that's going to continue. Although it's going to be a very close game, but the Chiefs seem to know how to handle these close games. But yeah, like I said, it's going to be a good game. It's going to be a good game, but how are they going to handle this if it's tight this time around, But yeah, I mean they're all definitely thinking it like, hey, we're really close and, maybe behind closed doors, maybe off to the side, some players are talking about it, not in Andy Reid's presence, but it's definitely on players' minds that they have a chance to make history. And, it's something that could possibly not be done again. This could be the only time you ever have a chance to see a team three-peat. Now, a lot of people probably don't want to see it because people are suffering from Chiefs fatigue, and we talked about that last week. But at this point for me, I mean, it doesn't bother me. If they get the three-peat, you could say, hey, I was able to see it. But only time will tell. We are almost there. We're 6 days away. I can't believe it, but that's where we're at. And it's going to be fun. It's going to be a fun one. But yeah, it's just you don't want it to distract players because, then they screw up in a game and then all of a sudden you're like looking at, oh, well, guess we're not getting it now. And I don't think this Eagles team is a team that you don't want to make mistakes. Because you saw what happened in the championship game with the Commanders. The Commanders turned the ball over, and then all of a sudden, 55-23 happens. And the Chiefs actually lost the turnover battle against the Bills, and they still won. Now, granted, there was only one turnover in the game. But the Bills could have turned it over a bunch of times because Josh Allen had 4 fumbles, but they recovered all of them. Don't want to make mistakes against this Eagles team, and you don't want some kind of outside distraction affecting what goes on inside with this game, which, like I said, I don't think it's going to happen. But you want to treat this game, you want to treat this Super Bowl as one game going in. The other 2 Super Bowls, the other previous 2 Super Bowls, and the other, previous 2 before that, the first one that they won and then the one they lost to Tampa, that doesn't affect this game. You got to focus on Sunday, take it one play at a time, one drive at a time, and go from there. I'm not trying to motivate the Chiefs, but I'm just saying you want this three-peat, but you gotta focus on just this game right here. And then if they're able to win it, then they'll get it. I mean, with Media Day coming up, they will be asked about it. It's going to be talked about a lot. And they'll give, their best answers to it without making it come off like, it's going to be a guarantee. Well, I don't think they would say, oh, we're going to win this thing. Well, they'll probably say leading up to the game, but not, I guess when they're addressing the media. But behind closed doors, they're going to say we're going to win this thing. And I think we all know that the Chiefs are thinking of it. They're thinking that. Because they've been here so many times. They know what's expected. But they're going up against a very good football team. And I'm going to keep saying that. These are arguably the 2 best teams that are going at it right now. And the Chiefs are going to have their hands full. The Eagles are going to have their hands full. And, we'll see if a turnover makes a big difference in this game. Because, like I said, we saw what happened in the NFC Championship game when the Commanders turned it over a bunch of times. The Eagles still have not turned the ball over yet in these playoffs. Unless you want to count the safety. And then for the Chiefs, they turned it over once against the Bills, but they still won the game. So, can the Eagles be the team that knocks off the Chiefs and prevents them from getting the three-peat? They definitely can. They definitely can. But we'll have to wait. But like I always say, we'll have to wait and see. We'll have to wait and see what happens. But it's important, though, that, the Chiefs have a guy like Andy Reid leading the team. Because you wonder, what if the roles were reversed and the Eagles had a three-peat on their mind? And Nick Sirianni, with all the complaints people have towards him, the team the Eagles have made the playoffs every single year he's been head coach. So he's got to be doing something right. But how would Nick Sirianni handle something like this? Well, we got to see them win first. Because, Nick Sirianni's kind of got a different style to him, a different kind of attitude than Andy Reid. and we saw the Eagles last year, what happened when things started to unravel over a stretch of games. Like how would he be able to handle something like this? That's why I think it's important also the Chiefs have Andy Reid in place. Like a veteran head coach. Nick Sirianni is a veteran coach, but not like Andy Reid is. And same thing with Belichick. The Patriots could have three-peated, towards the end of the dynasty there. It's just in between the two championships. They lost one to Nick Foles. And Tom Brady threw for over 500 yards in that game. And people kind of blame Belichick because he benched Malcolm Butler, and the Patriots secondary got torched in that game. But yeah, I basically, when it comes to this, you like to have that veteran leader, that experienced leader that, and this Chiefs team, they got, the main core is still there from this run. You got Patrick Mahomes and Travis Kelce and Chris Jones, Andy Reid, of course, Steve Spagnuolo. A lot of the guys that, this team has changed a lot since Mahomes first started. But like I said, the main core of it is still there. And, I know I was talking about how would Nick Sirianni handle this, but, they still got their guys too. They still got their main core. It hasn't been for as long as the Chiefs, but, you've had A.J. Brown for a few years now. Devontae Smith, Jalen Hurts, Brandon Graham, Lane Johnson. Nick Sirianni, of course, has been there. So, probably they would obviously deal with a potential three-peat a different way, but again, who knows? But let me know what you guys think about the Chiefs' mindset or Andy Reid's mindset going into this game. Do you think that the three-peat on their minds could be a potential distraction for them? I don't think it will. They'll be ready for it. But let me know in the comments. So before we go to break, just want to remind you guys once again to tip or donate and get your comments recognized. Make sure to hit that super chat button in the chat if you want to see me acknowledge any thought or comment you may have throughout the live broadcast. Makes the show more lively, more entertaining between myself, the host, and you guys, the viewers. We appreciate you guys' viewership each and every day, so any contribution you can make to the show means the world to us as we put out content for you guys each and every day. And also, the other way to help out the show is by going to the link at the bottom of the show segment on the ticker, gsmcpodcast.net. That is gsmcpodcast.net. So when we come back from our next break, we will talk about Sam Darnold and his stock kind of declining because of the rough playoff game that he had against the Rams and, even before that, the regular season finale against the Lions. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
Looking for your daily fix of sports talk without having to pay for it? GSMC Sports Network is available on YouTube. Just search GSMC Sports Network. Get your fix of daily sports talk shows on YouTube, absolutely free. NFL, college football, NBA, MLB, MMA, UFC, fantasy football, and so much more. GSMC Sports Network has shows running all day long, with new sports shows starting every 2 hours. Just like on your favorite cable sports channel, except GSMC Sports Network is absolutely free. Just search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube to catch one of your new favorite shows, like the GSMC College Football Podcast, Chip Shot Football Podcast, Hoops and Heels Women's Sports Podcast, GSMC Basketball Podcast, and so many more. Check it out for yourself. GSMC Sports Network, now available on YouTube absolutely free. Search GSMC Sports Network on YouTube right now.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast, and for the third part of the show, we're going to talk about Sam Darnold and his declining value. So, this is from an article on Bleacher Report. So, according to Jeff Howe of The Athletic, Darnold's poor play over the Minnesota Vikings' final 2 games of the season supposedly scared teams that may have otherwise considered signing him, which kind of makes sense because Darnold was not great. Now, Howe added that Darnold was once viewed as the top free agent available and a lock to land a contract worth over $40 million per year, but that may no longer be the case because of the poor play. And you look at what he did in those games. So he went 18 of 41 for 166 yards, no touchdowns against the Lions. And then he went 25 of 40 for 245 yards, 1 touchdown and a pick against the Rams, and was sacked 9 times. And he put together a strong season. 4,300 yards passing, 35 touchdowns, 12 picks, a completion rate of 66.2%. Was solid. And then you go back to, his stats with previous teams. So with the Jets, he had a 13 and 25 record, 59.8 completion rate, 45 touchdowns to 39 interceptions. With the Panthers in 2 years, he went 8 and 9, a 59.5 completion rate, 16 touchdowns and 16 interceptions. And then last year with the 49ers, he was the backup to Brock Purdy. And he was signed to, start out as the quarterback. He was signed to be the bridge guy to J.J. McCarthy. And then J.J. McCarthy got hurt, and Darnold ended up starting the whole year. And I read you his stats already, but put together a good year. But then did not end well. And the teams that need a quarterback. You got 3 teams that are picking in the top 3, and the Titans, the Browns, and the Giants. You got the Raiders who need a quarterback. The Jets, we'll see what they end up doing if they bring back Aaron Rodgers or they go in another direction. You also got the Steelers, who we'll talk about in the next segment. But I'm not surprised by this. And leading up to those 2 games, I know I've said it, that this would be very telling of Sam Darnold. Because you heard the reports out there that he's going to be in for a big payday, and rightfully deserved, but let's see how he does in these big defining games. And the Lions, that game came down to the division and the number 1 seed, and Darnold did not play well, although the offensive line, even in the offensive line in both games for the Vikings was not good either. So I can't blame Darnold's poor play, solely on just him. Now, he was not great in both games, but in the Rams game, when you get sacked 9 times, some of it was his fault because he held on to the ball too long, but what do you want him to do? That Rams pass rush was relentless against him. That Lions pass rush was relentless against him. So, it's not all on Darnold, but when you're just watching the game and you're seeing Darnold get sacked all over the place and he's missing guys, people are going to see games differently. Now, I think Darnold deserves a good contract based off of how he played, but you also fall into that trap of, hey, he did good here, that means he'll do good with us. I think Darnold benefited from being in this system with the Vikings, with KevinO'Connell. And you're throwing to the best receiver in football in Justin Jefferson. You got a couple of good playmakers on that side of the ball besides him as well. You have a good tight end. You have a good number 2. Running game was decent, although it could have been better. But Aaron Jones did have a nice year for the Vikings, and he wants to be back. And you were backed by a very good defense. Vikings have one of the best rosters in the NFL. So now, if you take Sam Darnold and you put him on a team like the Titans, you put him on a team like the Browns, the Giants, the Raiders, the numbers are going to go down. And all of a sudden now, you're paying all this money for this quarterback, the quarterback that put up these big numbers with the Vikings, but all of a sudden now he's not putting up those same numbers with your team. But that's because your team does not have the same arsenal that the Vikings have. So, if I'm Sam Darnold, I'd want to stay with the Vikings. And, there's going to be some pressure because now J.J. McCarthy is going to come back. And, then you all of a sudden have to worry about, well, if I don't play well, then they're going to sit me, and then J.J. McCarthy's going to take over, and I might not get my job back. So there's also that. But, Sam Darnold is always going to deserve a place on a roster, even if he's not a starter. Even as a backup, even though he didn't play like a backup this year. But it's not like, Sam Darnold gets benched for J.J. McCarthy. If that ended up happening, he wouldn't find another job. And there's always teams needing quarterbacks. But like I said, I get why NFL teams would be a little hesitant because now all of a sudden he played in these big games and he just did not deliver. And, I'm a Giant fan. I don't want the Giants to give Sam Darnold $40 million. Because I know for a fact Sam Darnold is going to come to the Giants and he's not going to play that good. And, we saw him get off to a fast start with Carolina a couple of years ago, right? They got off to a 3-0 start. Christian McCaffrey gets hurt, and then all of a sudden Sam Darnold was not the same quarterback. And he ended up finishing with an 8-9 record overall. I feel like that's the Sam Darnold you're going to get. Sam Darnold will make plays for you, but he's not going to be the guy that we saw in Minnesota. Because Sam Darnold fits that system. A lot of quarterbacks would fit that system. But this was a career year for him. And I just think, another team goes out and overpays for him. Because it wouldn't surprise me if another team does that. And then you're just going to end up not getting the same guy. And then all of a sudden you're stuck with this big contract. I could definitely see a team doing that and then just having buyer's remorse. Now, I don't want that for Sam because he had a great year and he's gone on a journey through this league. And, it seems like he finally found his footing after some time because, you went from, Adam Gase and actually, wait. Well, didn't they have Todd Bowles? I think Todd Bowles was Todd Bowles last year, 2018? And then they went to Adam Gase. And then he goes to the Panthers. And, you had Matt Rule there. And then, you go to the 49ers and you back up Purdy. And then you go to the Vikings. And then you get your shot. And he puts together this great year. Now, I don't know what the Vikings are going to do. Do the Vikings want to bring him back? How are they going to handle this? Because we saw, they moved off of Kirk Cousins. They had no problem doing that. And Kirk Cousins put together some good years for them. Now, I think if Kirk Cousins didn't get hurt, maybe things would have gone a little bit differently. Maybe Kirk Cousins would have stayed. But they let him go regardless. And they drafted J.J. McCarthy, and you also had Sam Darnold. So, yeah, we'll see. We'll see what they end up doing. Obviously, nothing is set in stone. J.J. McCarthy's no guarantee. How is he going to be coming off of this injury? The Vikings still view him as the future. But, you still want to have that insurance policy just in case maybe he still isn't ready. And maybe you continue to have him sit behind Darnold. Right now, it's hard to say what is going to happen. I think Darnold deserves another shot with the Vikings. But the Vikings just had this incredible year 14-3. I mean, I didn't see that coming. I didn't even have them making the playoffs because I just didn't know how the quarterback play was going to be. And Darnold ended up playing really well, and they won 14 games. So now going into next year, what do you do? I mean, I think maybe there's definitely going to be, they're definitely going to communicate. They're definitely going to talk about things. But, I mean, I think if Darnold sets a price, if Darnold and his camp, if they set a price and they price the Vikings out, the Vikings are going to say, all right, we're out. And then, you're going to have another team come in and maybe give him what he actually wants. Which, like I said, I think it could be a mistake. Very well could be a mistake. Now, if he ends up, if he went to, I know I mentioned the Steelers. The Steelers I don't think would be a bad spot. But the problem is they don't have the elite level talent like the Vikings do on offense. And also their offensive line is not as good as the Vikings. Even though the Vikings offensive line struggled down the stretch, Steelers offensive line has not been great. The Steelers O-line used to be really good when you had Pouncey and I'm trying to think of who else. And David DeCastro and Villanueva, those guys. I'm trying to think, who else am I missing? But either way, during that time, with Big Ben, Le'Veon Bell, and Antonio Brown, the offensive line was really good. But this offensive line, it's a young, inexperienced offensive line, and hopefully they continue to grow and they become that solid unit. But I don't know. If Darnold went to Titans or, the Browns. I mean, look, the Browns still have talent on their team. It's just, injuries and, their quarterback play just was a disaster. It was the complete opposite of the previous season. Kevin Stefanski was a coach of the year before. So, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens. But let me know what you guys think. Where does Darnold end up? Does he stay with the Vikings? Does he go elsewhere? Let me know in the comments. We're going to take our next break. When we come back, speaking of the Steelers, we'll talk about Russell Wilson, what he had to say recently on wanting to stay with the Steelers. So with that being said, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows. Available everywhere podcasts are found.
All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the fourth part of the show, we are going to talk about Russell Wilson and, just his recent comments on, wanting to come back to the Steelers. And I know I talked about this last week, but, there's those rumblings about maybe wanting to reunite with Pete Carroll in Vegas. And right now, he wants to stay in Pittsburgh. He has repeatedly stated his preference is to return to the Steelers, and, talked about his love for the team, unfinished business, all that. And we talked about this. Who should the Steelers go with? Should it be him, Justin Fields? I leaned more towards Justin Fields just because I feel like you could get more out of him. But this is what Russ said. He said his plan was to return with the Steelers, adding that there was a lot more to do after his first season with the team ended. He He said, I'm looking forward to hopefully going back to the Steelers, and we'll see what happens with the rest. I love it in Pittsburgh. And this is also what he said. Pete's going to be a great coach, obviously. This is on Pete Carroll. He's great at what he does, but I'm focused on the Steelers. I've been very fortunate to play 13-plus years, and I've got a lot more ball left in me. I think staying healthy is always the thing. You've got to be healthy to play your best, and I feel great right now. Because earlier in the year, he didn't start out, the year. He missed, some time because of the calf injury, and then he got healthy, and then the Steelers inserted him back into the starting lineup. And, I thought he played okay. His numbers ended up not being that bad. He did go 6-5 as a starter. But, yeah, in 11 games, 2,400 yards passing, 16 touchdowns, 5 picks. It's not bad. The problem is the Steelers, once again, were one and done. And you knew going into that game against the Ravens, the playoff game, that they just were not going to win. I kept saying, well, maybe, they're due for a win. It's just the Ravens were the better team. And Russ is just not the same quarterback. Now, I still think he could be a starter. I think he proved that to you. But he is not an elite-level starter. He is not the same Russell Wilson that we saw in Seattle. And I've been saying that constantly. That guy just does not exist anymore. Now, I said, could a potential Russell Wilson-Pete Carroll reunion work? I guess. But I don't know if that's going to happen. Russ liked it in Pittsburgh, and I think, the Russ that we saw in Pittsburgh was definitely the Russ that we saw, better than the Russ that we saw in Denver. I agree with that. I apologize with my camera today. It's just, again, acting up. But, yeah, no, definitely agree with that. That the Russ that we saw in Pittsburgh is definitely better than the Russ we saw in Denver. But the Steelers, they got to add more to their offense, not just with the quarterback position, but also you need more elite level talent. You need better receivers. You need. The running game needs to be more consistent too. And I don't think they should bring back Najee Harris. I think they need to go a different direction there. I think Jaylen Warren is a restricted free agent. But yeah, if I'm the Steelers, I'm letting Najee Harris go. And there's receivers on the market that they could go after. There's Chris Godwin. Maybe they could take T. Higgins away from the Bengals. Who knows? But they need something. They need another threat opposite of George Pickens. And who knows how long George Pickens is going to last? How long are they going to put up with his antics? And this is kind of a common theme with Steelers receivers. They just act up. In different ways. With Antonio Brown, and then, you had Juju Smith-Schuster with the TikToks, and now you got George Pickens getting into fights with fans. It's just... But you know what? This organization, they take in players like that because they have Mike Tomlin, who's the enforcer, who's not going to stand for that. Now, stuff like this still continues to happen under his watch, but it's hard to coach a football team. I'm an outsider. It's hard. There's so many personalities that you have to deal with. There's so many areas that you have to be around for. It's a lot. So, you can't entirely fault him for that. Also, he's not the one. He's got power, but ultimately he's not the guy that's making all the decisions to bring in certain players. But yeah, look, I think if Russ is happy in Pittsburgh and the Steelers want to bring him back, he's going to come back. I'm going to say right now, it just everything points towards the Steelers bringing back Russ. But I think they also need to have a backup plan as well, because, Russ is not going to be playing forever. And you need your quarterback of the future. They need that. So, in this draft coming up, the Steelers are a team that I think needs to draft a quarterback. And I'm not saying they're going to do that with their first pick, but, maybe if there is a guy that they like, they could take him in the late first round. But I don't know. I mean, if you're bringing back Russ, that's an indication that, hey, we're still trying to compete here and, get to the playoffs, win in the playoffs, and, make a run here. Because they also have a defense that is one of I think is the most expensive defense in the NFL. And got guys on that defense that aren't getting any younger. So you got to get an offense that can complement that defense on a consistent basis. And it looked like that the Steelers might have finally had that. But then all of a sudden, 5-game losing streak happens. So they got to add more playmakers to this offense. And they do have some, and it's not like they don't have anything. It's just you need more. Whether that's a receiver, or there are a ton of running backs in this draft. Let Najee Harris go and bring in another one. Pair him up with Jaylen Warren. Go that route. Maybe take another receiver. Either that or go out and sign one. They got to do something. But yeah, I mean, all signs point to Russ coming back, I think. Because even when I talked about, what Art Rooney II had to say, they could bring back both, but not, or they could bring back one, just not the other. That's that's probably what's gonna end up happening, and I think it's gonna end up being Russ. It's gonna be Russ that they bring back, and if that's the case, I mean the Steelers are gonna. They'll win 9 games again, 9 or 10 games, and then that's it. I don't really expect them to do anything else. But that's what the Steelers like to do. And, that's why, their fans are kind of fed up because, it's just they've kind of been going through the same thing since Ben Roethlisberger retired. Hey, you made it through the grind of the regular season. Get to the postseason, and what happens? And it's not even like they play these close games. They never stand a chance. These last 2 years, when they have made the playoffs, post Ben Roethlisberger, they have no chance. They go up against the Bills. The Bills go up 21-0 against them. Then they go up against the Ravens. 21-0. They never stand a chance. I mean, you knew after that first series in the first round, they had no shot. They had no shot. And it's just that's what Steelers football has been in recent years. And, it stinks, but it's true. And, I thought the Steelers did well in the offseason. They tried to change things up. They brought in Russ. They brought in Justin Fields. But, it just wasn't enough. Now, I don't know how the season would have played out had Justin Fields ended up starting the whole year. Like, how would that have... I'm just trying to fix my camera here. How would that have worked? I don't know. Man, camera just does not want to work today, guys. You're doing good in the beginning, then all of a sudden it just I don't know. I really don't know. Yeah, this is kind of like the Steelers quarterback position. It just works one day and then doesn't work the next. I know, this is just so annoying. But just bear with me as I try to figure this out. Yeah, see, it just doesn't... I mean, thankfully, like I always say, I mean, I have this is my laptop camera. But I don't understand why it just does not want to work. I don't get it. I don't get it. But okay, there we go. Now we're good for now. But yeah, I'm fine with the Steelers bringing back Russ, but I think you also need to plan for the future. They need to do that. And Russell Wilson's not going to be expensive, so that gives you that flexibility to go out and add more talent, specifically to the offense. And yeah, of course, they're going to add to their defense too, but the offense, I think, should be the priority this offseason. And that doesn't mean, spend like a drunken sailor and, go out there and, just be irresponsible, but go and add more playmakers to this side of the ball. Because they need it. They need another threat besides George Pickens. You got Pat Freiermuth, you got George Pickens, but you need more. Calvin Austin, I like too. I liked some of he was making some plays for them this year. But they went out and they drafted Roman Wilson out of Michigan, and he did nothing for them. You traded Deontay Johnson, but you never, replaced him. You traded for Mike Williams, you got him, and they barely used him. What was the point of that? So, and also, it's not even just that. People are going to complain about the play calling, too. So, it's just, I don't know. They got to figure it out. Russ wants to be there. There's mutual interest. They're probably going to keep him. And let's see what they do as a backup plan. I mean, I think they should go into this draft and maybe try to get, a quarterback in, not saying the first round, but maybe, in one of the later rounds, something. Main priority is bolster this offense. So, we'll see what happens. But let me know what you guys think about Russ. Do you think the Steelers should bring him back, go in a different direction? Let me know in the comments. So we are going to take our final break of the show. I'm going to continue to try to fix this camera issue. And when we come back, we'll talk about Cam Newton, what he had to say regarding his MVP Super Bowl take. So for one final time today, stick around, and we'll be right back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. All right, and we are back here on the GSMC Football Podcast. And for the final part of the show, we are going to now get into talking about Cam Newton's Super Bowl MVP take. This was something interesting that he had to say. So, yesterday, actually, they were airing a lot of the previous Super Bowls on NFL Network. They were condensed, half-hour spots. And watching that game against the Broncos. It's just, that game just sucked the life out of him, well, especially at the end. And the Panthers turned the ball over 4 times in that game because you had Von Miller, the strip sack for a touchdown, and then Cam Newton threw a pick later in the game. There was also a fumble by Mike Tolbert, if you remember him. He was the fullback back in the day for Carolina. And then, of course, you had Von Miller, strip sack of Cam Newton again later in the game where he didn't dive on the ball, and, the Broncos, pounced on top of it. And then they definitely got points out of it. I don't know if C.J. Anderson scored the touchdown on that ensuing possession, but either way, I mean, that Super Bowl haunts Cam Newton. Now, when it comes to his MVP and getting a Super Bowl ring, this is what he said. He said he wouldn't trade his MVP for a Super Bowl. And the exact quote for that is here. So he says, he wouldn't trade it. He said, if you give, well, Stephen A. Smith asked him, this was on First Take, if you could give back the league MVP for a Super Bowl championship, would you do it? And he said no. And he said, so this is the full quote. Everybody's not going to be Michael Jordan. Everybody's not going to be Patrick Mahomes. Everybody's not going to be these individuals who have the luxury of saying, hey, I not only dominated this sport, but I also have championships to be back, or have championships to back it. Let me remind you, Brad Johnson won a Super Bowl. Trent Dilfer won a Super Bowl. Respectfully, Nick Foles won a Super Bowl. So, yes, when you look at those guys and say, okay, what's more important? Would you have preferred to win a Super Bowl? I think that's the humble approach. But if we're being honest, the impact of you holding yourself accountable to say everything has a responsibility to do, and you can say as an MVP award winner or an All-American, you've had your end of the bargain down. That's what it really comes down to for me. I know that's not the popular pick. I'm not going to be polarized. My take is I'm taking individual success because I did my job. Football is not about one guy trying to do 11 jobs. It's 11 guys doing one job. So he would rather keep his MVP than win a Super Bowl. I mean, it is a different approach because, yeah, I mean, most people would probably say, oh, I'd rather take a Super Bowl because, that's the ultimate goal is winning a championship. But, Cam is of the mindset, hey, look, that's really important to him. He did earn that. I mean, he put together a very good year in 2015. And his 2015 season, if we go back and look at his stats from that year, and also, all the rushing touchdowns, too, that he had that season. So we go back to 2016, and 35 touchdowns to 10 picks, 3,800 yards passing. And that year he had 10 rushing touchdowns. And they weren't tush pushes. These were legit rushing touchdowns for Cam Newton. He put together a very good year. It's just, went up against a good defense in the Broncos, and, they got shut down. And they lost the turnover battle. I think it was, the Broncos ended up turning it over. Wow. I apologize again for the camera issues, everyone, but it's been like this for, last couple of weeks where it just does not want to work. And I don't know why. I mean, it's now it's even when I plug the camera in, it just doesn't want to come up. But it is an interesting take though with Cam Newton, and I think that Super Bowl, like I said, it haunts him. And I think he want to have both. You want to have both the championship and the MVP. But man, okay. I think we're good now. But it's just not the case. It just wasn't meant to be. That Broncos defense was historic in 2015. And it's kind of like what happened to Peyton Manning and the Broncos in the Super Bowl against the Seahawks. You went up against a really good defense, and they just, the defense shut you down. Now, the Panthers in this Super Bowl, I mean, it's not really saying much, but they put together, more of a fight than the Broncos did in the Super Bowl against the Seahawks. But that's also because the Panthers had a very good defense too. And they were going up against the Broncos offense that was not very good. But Peyton Manning and that offense did just enough. They managed the game, and, they ultimately came out with the win. But, I don't know. For me personally, like, if I was an MVP and, I hadn't won a Super Bowl and I'm playing quarterback, I mean, you would... I would want to have that Super Bowl ring. I would. But you know what? That MVP does mean a lot to Cam Newton. And I think it's hard to trade that away because, that's, you earn that. And I guess people would look at that as taking the selfish approach. Because it's like you want to take something that's individual, as opposed to, hey, like, if we win the Super Bowl, everybody benefits from it. So, I'm not going to really get on Cam for it. I know that there's probably people out there that will, but it was a special year. It's just they came up short. And that was Cam Newton's only chance because the Panthers didn't make it there after that. And he got hurt, unfortunately, and that's shortened his career. But he also took a lot of punishment. During that year, I mean, you had all those rushing touchdowns, like I said, and they were not tush pushes, but, there was ones where he got flipped up in the air, and how about, against the Falcons that season, he was dragging people for a first down. He took punishment, and that ended up, in the long term, really hurting him. And, he had that second stint in Carolina, but that ended up not going anywhere. It was his shoulders, throwing shoulder. But, yeah, and it's unfortunate because, if he doesn't get hurt, he's probably still playing. But injuries stink. I mean, look at Andrew Luck. The punishment he took. Had to call it a career. Now, he could have kept playing. I mean, with Cam, nobody was really lining up to bring him in, it doesn't seem like. So, yeah, it's just, injuries are a part of the game, and it's just, it stinks when, takes these players out, but it's what happens. So, but yeah, just something interesting, though, that Cam would rather have the MVP than the Super Bowl. But, I get it. From his perspective, I get it. I just think it's funny, though, when, like, you'll ask Tom Brady, and he would trade, rings for the ones that he lost to the Giants. Now, that's a little bit different, because that's championships for other championships, but this is a little bit of a different conversation because it has to deal with an MVP and a championship. But also, another thing, like I said, they were airing those old Super Bowls. So I watched from Super Bowl 45, so the Packers and the Steelers up until it stopped, which was the Falcons-Patriots Super Bowl. And I miss that era. I do. Those are some really good Super Bowls. Pretty much all of them, except for the Broncos, which I didn't watch that one, the Broncos-Seahawks one. All those Super Bowls were all good. Like the Packers and the Steelers was good. Steelers, Giants-Patriots was good. Then you had the 49ers and the Ravens. The Patriots, Falcons, and Patriots, Seahawks, and even the Super Bowl against the Super Bowl with the Panthers and the Broncos. Like, obviously it wasn't super close, but there were a lot of big plays in that game, mainly by the defense. Those were entertaining games. And I might have to do maybe do a list of the top 5 Super Bowls from the last 10 years or something. Well, this is 10 plus years. I'm talking about the Packers and the Steelers, but yeah, no, interesting stuff from Cam Newton, and like I said, it was nice watching those Super Bowls yesterday because they were some good games. But yeah, let me know what you guys think about what Cam Newton has to say. Did you agree with him? Do you disagree with him? If you were in his shoes, would you rather trade in your MVP for a Super Bowl? Let me know. So that is pretty much it for the show for today. Thank you guys for tuning in. Throughout the whole week, we'll be doing different kinds of Super Bowl topics leading up to the game. Friday will be the big one where we, obviously really break down the game and I give you my pick for the game. Yeah, no, it's gonna be a fun week, and we're gonna make sure to cover it as well as we can. So make sure to check out all the other shows as well. Make sure to leave a like, comment, and subscribe to the video. And as always, I'm Kenneth Gruenfelder signing off from the GSMC Football Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Sports Network. Have a good day, and I will talk to you guys tomorrow. Take care.
Let's go. I wake up to a little bit of drool on my pillow, feel like it's gonna be a bad day. Yeah, I'm tired of